for joining us for the Doctoral Psychology Alumni Panel from HES to PhD and PsyD. We're thrilled to have you here. Before we jump in, just a few quick logistics. We're recording today's session so students who couldn't attend can watch it later. The video will be posted on our YouTube channel, and my colleague will drop all the social media links in the chat. So feel free to follow us if you haven't already. Please stay muted during the panel discussion. We will have a dedicated Q&A at the end, so feel free to put your question in the chat or ask them live once we open the floor. So my name is Ivy Zhang. I'm the president of the HES Psychology Student Club. I'm currently in my final year of the ALM in psychology. It's truly exciting to see many of you here today. Events like this are at the heart of a mission to support and guide students through their academic and professional growth. I'm joined today by two amazing club leaders, Maya Bach, our director of events, who leads our club podcast team and will also help facilitate the Q&A today. And Maya and Pooja Balsari, our director of technology. She provides a very essential technical support to the club. Thank you both for being here. We're so honored to have our four incredible alumni with us. Each of them is currently pursuing a doctoral degree in psychology or in a very related field. So let me introduce them one by one. Our first panelist, Kimia Grigoriev, a first-year PsyD student at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology and a research fellow at the Center of Mindfulness and Compassion at Howard Medical School. She completed both her ALB and AOM in psychology at HES. She is also the founding president of the HES Psychology Student Club. Welcome back, Kimia. Her work spans neurodiversity, trauma, depression, anxiety, and suicidality, and she's passionate about expanding access to creative and inclusive mental health care. We're so excited to have you with us today, Kimia. Next, we have Emily Kovalik, a second-year PhD student in developmental psychology at the University of Toronto. She earned her ALM in psychology from HES in 2024. Her experience working closely with children and family inspired her to pursue research that bridges science and practice to promote children's well-being. Her current work examines how kindness develops in children and how parent-child relationships shapes prosocial behavior. Thank you so much for being here, Emily. Our next panelist is Mark O'Brien, an ALM graduate from HES and now a fourth-year PsyD student at William James College, specializing in clinical neuropsychology. He has trained across hospital, medical, and VA settings, working with a wide range of neurological and psychiatry conditions. His dissertation focuses on personality and participation in psychedelic research, and he's preparing for his APA postdoctoral internship next year. We're so glad to have you with us, Mark. And finally, we have Chong-Yin Kam, now in his third year of PhD in theoretical biology at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. He completed his ALM in psychology at HES in 2023. He studied in evolutionary psychology at HES and discovered a passion for theoretical and mathematical modeling, which led him to study social evolution through computational and evolutionary theory. His journey shows how interdisciplinary thinking can open academic paths. It's such a pleasure to have you, Chong. We're so grateful to have each of you being here and sharing your experience and wisdom with our community. With that, let's begin our conversation. So to start us off, could each of you briefly share what you're currently working on in your doctoral program, and perhaps a big question or theme that in your field that keeps you energized and motivated? Let's start with Kimia.
Sure. I think, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's always lovely to be in the company of like-minded people and so many kind people here, I know. What I'm doing right now, I'm in my first year in clinical psychology at the Chicago School in the Los Angeles campus. And I feel really lucky that, well, actually, one of my professors from Harvard suggested this school to me because they had sent students from here, from Harvard Extension School to the Chicago School, especially in LA, and they were really happy about the program, including PsyD in clinical psychology and in the, what is the other one? Not the clinical one, another psychology field. There's also an online version that I know a lot of students are interested in for people that, they cannot relocate. There's an online version, and one of my friends is also doing the doctorate in psychology for that. But regarding my program specifically, I am involved in the courthouse project right now with the LA County Superior Court, and I get to do neurocognitive tests on people that have been incarcerated. And it's very interesting. It's something that I had no idea, I had never done before. So it's very interesting for me. And I got so interested about it. I'm actually a lead for the neurocognitive team right now. And on top of that, my school offers public policy and mental health groups. So I'm actually working on a public policy for autism and depression and suicidality, and creating a better educational program and training for specialists, for doctors, and for different fields to better treat people with autism and different type of neurodivergence. So those are some of the things I'm working on, but honestly, I'm so excited to finally find a field that lets me do exactly what I wanted to do. And I'm slowly also getting involved in forensic psychology. Plus, I'm doing my research fellowship with Harvard Medical School and um, CHA, which is Cambridge Health Alliance, and I get to work on a study for PTSD to better treat people with traumas, because many of them end up dropping out as in the process, because sometimes the treatments have not been effective. So that's something I'm studying too. So I love being involved in clinical psychology.
Thank you for that. So anybody else want to jump in?
I can jump in. I'm in my second year of my PhD, and I'm very developmental psychology heavy. I am technically in the experimental psychology program as opposed to a clinical psychology program, but I'm really lucky that I get to take some clinical perspectives in my work because I'm jointly advised, and one of my advisors is a licensed psychotherapist, so she has a lot of clinical experience. Um, Currently, I'm looking at the development of pro-sociality and kind behaviors from early to middle childhood. And it's a project that's just really near and dear to my heart because I think the world could always use a little bit more kindness. And it's really great to see kind of the beginnings of what that looks like. And something that kind of keeps me going is actually whenever I discovered my dissertation topic, because I kind of had this inkling of an idea. And so I thought, okay, let's go to the literature and see what they say. And it turns out there's not a lot of literature on the thing that I'm studying. And I thought that there would be. So I just get really excited every day to just look for things and kind of answer questions and test and then find that out. I feel like I just get to be like, what's going on here? And then I have the resources and the support to actually go test it and answer these questions, which I don't know. I'm just a very curious person. So I find that really exciting.
Thank you so much for that.
I can go ahead and jump in if that works. So I am in my fourth year of my clinical PsyD program, focusing in neuropsychology. When I started this phase of grad school, I had no idea what neuropsychology was. I'd never heard of it, but it sounded pretty cool. And I had a first year clinical supervisor who asked me in an interview, what I thought about testing, and I said, I have no idea, but I'm willing to give it a shot. And I ended up working with the pediatric population that year, and I I really enjoyed the testing and the kind of like the data-driven component of that. And from there, my career kind of followed that trajectory, definitely following more of an adult population and older adult population, um, doing a lot of neuropsychological assessment in hospital settings, private practice. I'm at a VA right now, so I get to work with veterans. Most recently, I have been focusing on some inpatient neuropsychology. So there's a lot of kind of crossover with comorbid psychiatric disorders, complex medical histories. Kind of makes sense where an individual is, admitted to a hospital setting. There might be a lot going on there. So oftentimes there's some kind of comorbid cognitive decline or questions of cognitive decline where an older individual might be having trouble with memory or there might be a concern for a younger individual, a younger adult with kind of an extensive psychiatric history. Is there something that's also going on there cognitively? And that's often when we're called in to kind of help to see if we can help differentiate that diagnosis. And like logistically, I would say now just I'm mostly focused on trying to get my APA internship next year. That's probably the biggest piece front of mind right now, and really wrap up my dissertation. I think that about covers it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mark, for that insight. Chung, do you have anything else to add about your experience? What are you currently working on?
Well, I am finishing the second year of my PhD study in biology. In Europe, doctoral program are usually 2 to 3 years, so I'm more than halfway through now, and there's less psychology in my doctoral study. I'm doing biology, but I am also touching a lot of topics on behavior, especially the evolution of behavior. My work involve using mathematics or computation, computational stimulation to figure out the evolution of certain behavioral strategy that could apply to human or some other animals. And yeah, I think even though now I'm working on biology, but the major motivation for me is to understand behavior and specifically human behavior.
Great, thank you. Thank you all. It's so inspirational to hear what drives you. I'd love to spot Emily for a moment. So developmental psychology covers an incredible wide landscape, right? From infancy to late adulthood. So could you tell us a little bit more, what drew you to this specific age group? You mentioned about children, right? So, and what are the developmental processes you study now, and what made that focus feel so meaningful to you?
Yeah, so this is I feel like this is almost a loaded question for me, and I won't go like totally into the whole lore, but I got into developmental psychology kind of completely by accident. Whenever I was starting my undergraduate studies, I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and I thought that psychology would be a good background for that. And so through my many twists and turns, one of the required courses that I was supposed to take for studying psychology, I had to do intro psych and research methods, and I also had to take it was called developmental psychology, the child. And going through that class, I became so fascinated with the idea that early childhood affects how you turn out in later adulthood. And I think for most of us here, that may seem almost obvious that how you're raised affects how you live. But I was just enamored by the thought that we can reliably study this and test this. And from there, I really latched on to the idea of attachment theory and this idea that children develop internal working models of social situationships and people by using their parents as a secure base to kind of judge. And so that went, from going from adults, that kind of brought me down to children. I had done some work with adolescents, and I still love working with adolescents to this day because their brains are so gooey, and they just have like all these developmental changes happening. But I have kind of continued to go younger and younger, and now I've kind of settled in early and middle childhood, because I think a lot about just the developmental trajectories and how people develop. And whenever we see adolescents that are having mental health struggles, or adults that are having mental health struggles, I think, well, how do we stop this? How do we prevent this? Like, how do we learn and understand what's going on earlier so that they have more productive developmental trajectories in the future? And so we've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. My master's thesis at HES was actually on like how early childhood experiences related to adulthood experiences. And now I'm currently working with 5-year-olds. I like early childhood because I feel like they're just starting to, this is 3 to 5 years old. I feel like they're just starting to become like sentient about the world. Like they start to notice things, and they're like, oh, okay, I'm a person and I exist. But they also still have this really wonderful childlike wonder of, oh, what's that? And I want to learn and I want to explore. So it's like a very nice little part of childhood where you can really nurture their interests, but they're also mature enough to understand the world around them at a higher level. And then middle childhood is this cool kind of transitionary phase where children are starting kindergarten, they're starting maybe like grade 1 or grade 2, and they have initially sort of used their parents for social referencing and used their parents as the space. But as they get older, they start to learn from their peers, and they start to value their peers more highly. And so I think that transition is really interesting, of seeing how do we transition from like parents to peers? How do we translate maybe from like parents to siblings? And so now I'm currently, I think as I mentioned before, looking at my dissertation really is going to be on how the quality of parent-child relationships and the synchrony of parent-child relationships relate to the development of pro-social behaviors. And so those would be things like helping, caring, sharing. I'm really particularly interested in sharing because it's a costly behavior, but it's also something that develops really early on in childhood. Like children just naturally share. So it kind of suggests that maybe we're hardwired to it. And I'm still in the inkling phases of that. I'd be happy to answer more questions about it, but that's sort of where I'm at and how I got there. I hope that answers the question sufficiently.
Great, thank you. What an interesting story. Let's shift to something that everyone in this virtual space can relate it to, the HES journey, like Emily mentioned a little bit. So many of us students are navigating their own path right now, trying to figure out what experiences or courses or projects will prepare them best for the doctoral study in the future. So looking back at your HES experience, which parts most prepare you for the doctoral work that you're doing now? It could be like a course that you pushed you thinking, or some mentor who guided you, or maybe a study or project. So which part of the HES experience were most beneficial to prepare you for the doctoral work that you are doing right now?
I can jump in. Mine's a little basic, I think, but given the nature of like, so my PsyD is obviously very clinically focused, and the ALM at HES was more theoretical. At least that was my experience, and it was kind of explained to me that that's sort of psychology at Harvard in general is kind of a more experimental approach. My like assignments at HES, I think were I got really good at literature reviews. Like while I was doing the written assignments that we had to do for classes, and I found that I eventually kind of like took that for granted because that was pretty much the extent of the assignments that I would submit would be like for like research papers would be like really good literature reviews. And then I didn't have to do that so much. And it was funny, like by the time it came time for me to um, do my literature review for my dissertation, I wasn't really worried about it at all because of the extensive experience I had with it. And I had found that, and I had to write papers and do lit reviews over the first few years of my program, but I didn't have to do it as frequently. And I was it was funny to like realize that it was like a skill that, you know, kind of does need to be like nurtured and practiced a little bit. So it took me a little bit to kind of like revamp that up to get going for the lit review of all lit reviews in the dissertation, I guess.
That's very insightful. Thank you so much, Mark. Anybody else want to tap on that topic?
Sure. I think I can also share. There was something I want to mention because this, like when I started, I had so many questions, obviously, because I started with my ALB first in psychology. Then I decided to do the joint degree program to go get my master's in it too. And I was really confused about if I should do the thesis path or do the capstone path. And one of my major worries from what I had heard is that if you do your thesis path, you can move on to a doctorate degree. But if you do a capstone path, you don't get to. Schools don't really accept you, or you have a lower chance of getting accepted. But what I actually learned in reality, it really depends on what you put into your degree and what connections you make. So some of the most important things is make great connections, especially with professors, with people in related fields that are like, you know, in supervisory roles. And take advantage of those, because that's going to make the difference. Not I didn't do the thesis path at the end because I decided it was just going to be more work for me, and it wasn't looking back at it, I felt like the capstone made me get what I wanted, which was like I got to create a storybook for kids, for neurodivergent kids, basically. So what I want to say is that if you are passionate about it, go for that thing, and then make sure you connect to all the people that can help you. One of the best things at Harvard Extension Schools was the amazing professors and mentors that I got to connect with. The resources like Harvard Innovation Lab, there's so much that you have access to. And like any other degree, the more work you put into it, the better things you're going to get out of it. So I highly recommend reach out, make those connections with your peers, with your professors, with other mentors. And also this, like if the fact that you guys are here, this is the best thing. Ask your peers, because sometimes some of the best things come from speaking to other students. They have learned something that can help you know something that you can help them. So HES, I think for me, was a life changer because it helped me have access to the world's best education and mentors, plus really outstanding students who were high achievers and already knew a lot, but they still wanted to learn. And I think that's a great population to be around and always learn from.
Thank you so much, Kimia, for bringing up the capstone and thesis. That's my next question. So for all of you, which track did you choose? How did that choice shape your doctoral application process? And what kind of guidance you could offer to our students who are currently deciding?
Maybe I can jump in now. I have taken the thesis path, and surprising to me, what I have learned most is that I am not interested in doing experimental work, because for that thesis, I have to design my own experiment, and I have to conduct it, and I have to do, say, data analysis and all that. And I just realized that it's not for me, and so that I switched to theoretical side of studying behavior. And I think one thing takeaway is just through taking the thesis course, you get the opportunity to run your own experiments, so that you will have first-hand experience of, okay, what that is all about. And in that journey, maybe you realize that, oh, I really enjoyed it, so that you apply for a PhD. Or you might be like me, you realize that it's not for you, so that you go into, I don't know, industry or something theoretical like me. And that is the most profound thing that I experienced in the master program. I think it is a really important thing that I learned.
Great, thank you, Tom. How about Emily and Mark? Which track did you do?
I'm happy to hop in on this one. So I also did the thesis track. I'm very, very pro thesis track, but that does not mean that I am anti-capstone, to be clear. And I actually did not really struggle on whether to go capstone or thesis whenever I had applied and was doing my master's. I knew from the beginning that I wanted to do the thesis track. I think I had had a lot of research experience prior to starting at Harvard. And so for me, I kind of felt confident that I would be able to run a project myself. But the thing that was maybe the most different compared to my prior experiences in undergrad was that I was like from start to finish, from the first idea to like the final draft of my thesis, was doing everything. It was my idea, it was my literature review. It was my going back and forth with the IRB. It was my designing the materials in Qualtrics. I cleaned and coded the data. I did everything. And I will say I had an absolutely wonderful advisor, incredibly great guy, but he was pretty hands off. And I almost designed it that way in some sense because I really wanted to prove to myself that this was something I could carry out from start to finish, given that now being in my PhD and being in an experimental PhD, I kind of have to do all of those things. I have to scan the literature and set up the experiments and run the data and write it up. It's all on me. And so it was a really great experience to be like, okay, I can do this as a one-man show, even though I have plenty of supports. To be sure. And so it was very confirmatory for me to know that, oh, like I do like research. I do like this process. I think that Sean made a great point of doing the thesis and understanding, oh, I don't really like research versus on the flip side, it might be, oh, I do really love research. And when I started my undergrad, I thought I didn't like research. I was like, I could never do a PhD because I don't like research. But the more and more I got into it, and especially the thesis and doing a topic that I was so fascinated by, really kind of solidified it for me. And I think they both, like capstone versus thesis, require a ton of writing. And I liked that with the thesis, I had a little bit of like, well, here are some results that come out of all of this writing versus I think the capstone is a very nice kind of story. But I wanted a little bit more like maybe meat. I don't want to sound like I'm discouraging the capstone because I think that it's very helpful for people who maybe are interested in other things. But I knew from the start, was never a question for me.
Yeah, so for me, I went the capstone route, and I did not have really any research experience leading up to that decision. So I found the idea of doing research like kind of unapproachable in a way. Like um, I wasn't sure that I like even could. Like I didn't have that kind of confidence. So I sort of kicked the can down the road because I did know that I was going to apply to a doctoral program, but I was like, I'll deal with that problem later. So the capstone did seem to me like a more feasible route for me. It's funny that I discuss, the benefits of, getting like really good at writing lit reviews and kind of like really getting honing that skill of reviewing what's out there in existing literature. On my capstone project, the feedback that I got was like the great literature review. Now like bring it forward. And like I struggled like applying what I had found because I had like really mastered like here's what everything says. And then I just like had a tough time like kind of like taking it that step further. So that was a good learning experience for me there where I was able to kind of like push through thinking, in all the articles and kind of like bring a project forward. But I guess I would say like now having gone through, the dissertation process and, conducting my own experimental research, getting my own data, like it's possible. So if you're afraid or if it's something like I've never even been close to this, well, like what would that, I don't even know what it would look like. But you're curious and you want to give it a shot, kind of echoing like the sentiments of like put everything in and see what you get, right? I wouldn't don't be shy. Just it's kind of a matter of being a little vulnerable and getting into it and just it's not impossible. So if anyone's kind of considering either way and you feel strongly, but you're a little nervous, think about it.
Thank you. Thank you all. It seems like everyone have a very different stories in terms of choosing, at their capstone thesis. Thank you so much for that insight. And now let's talk about something that's on top of mind many students, the doctoral application process itself. So from researching programs to preparing material to interviewing, and it feels so overwhelming sometimes for students. So hearing your experience could be very, valuable. So for students who are not applying this year but are planning ahead, could you please talk about how you approach research and doctoral programs, building your school list, identifying programs that align with your goals, and developing some kind of like ideal timeline? And also for students who are applying right now, what advice would you give for the application process itself and the interview phase? Anything that you wish you had known sooner?
I can start that. For me, I was going through a lot when I decided that I wanted to continue, because I had been doing like ALB, then my ALM, and I knew that I was kind of getting burnt out, but I was like, I want to get my doctorate. So I started searching, and maybe later than most people should. So I think a lot of you are ahead right now. But what you want to do, I think, from my perspective of what I learned, some schools still require your scores for your GRE, even though like for, I think the master's program here, I don't think they required it. I went directly into it as a joint degree. So some schools, they do require. So that means that if you want to do that, make sure you set time aside to take the GRE, study for it and take the GRE. And there's about like a $200 expense for taking that test, which that's a whole other issue that I had with them. But so check that school and see if that's okay for you, if it's worth for you to spend that time studying and preparing for that, and then getting your scores and all that stuff. The other thing is, I say, please be in touch with the mentors that know you really well, your professors, and give them enough time to write you your reference letters, because that's really important too. And the other thing is, do your research on the schools. So for psychology, for clinical psychology, one of the things you want to search is to make sure they are APA approved schools, and that they are APIC, their scores on APIC. I think it's ACCIP, something like that. Their scores need to be high passing rates for the schools. Otherwise, it's giving you chances that the school is not going to meet some requirements, or it might disappoint you basically. So you want to look into that information. And I learned all of those because I spoke to my professors. I had no idea before that. And yeah, and sometimes even talking to my professors and other students, they're like, be careful because that school, like they treat you like this, or it's really toxic environment. This and like sometimes if you talk to people, you get a better understanding of it too, even if it looks good on your resume. Like, do you want to put yourself through it? Especially for like some PhDs, which are wonderful, but PhDs can take I think 7 or more years. Some of my friends have been doing 9 years now, versus PsyD, which is about 5 years. And then some of the other programs for PhD related to psychology can take only up to 3 years, even in the United States. So do a program that fits your schedule and fits your needs and what you're looking for. Just do your research really well.
I would love to hop in on this one as well. I've actually applied to PhD programs twice. And my first process versus my second process were pretty different. The first time I applied, I was coming fresh out of undergrad with really great marks, a lot of research experience. I didn't have any publications, but I'd had a lot of engagement in the community doing poster presentations and things like that. And I had my sights set on a clinical psychology PhD, and I was really interested in developmental psychopathology as well. So I applied to like all these clinical psych programs at very prestigious schools, and that was probably the perfect storm. But I was also applying in 2020, and there was other storms happening in the world at that time. And the thing that changed between my first and second time that I wish I had done sooner and that it seems other people find helpful when I mention it, is like really, again, as Kimia mentioned, doing your research. And I think it can be very overwhelming to think, I really like psychology, or where do I want to go, experimental or clinical, and how do I find mentors? And something that really helped me was actually going and looking at the authors of papers that I cited often, in like the kind of work that I'm interested in. There is always these like same like pods of authors or same kinds of papers that I was constantly reading and referencing. And I thought, okay, well, I really like their research and I cite them a lot. So where are they and what are they doing now? And that made a world of difference. The list of schools I applied to my second time versus first time, like varied wildly. And it was also like different like levels of prestige too. I feel like I didn't go for the names of schools. I went for the research of schools. It's really, really important that you look for a mentor and look for someone who's doing research that's aligned with your interests and potentially even some of your past experiences. And on top of that, also checking if they're taking students. There's one prof whose work I am obsessed with. It's Marinus van Itzendorn. And he's in Amsterdam. And I was like, oh, I would love to work with him. I love his research. But he is like phasing into retirement. And I'm like, oh, I can't go work with him. So checking these profs' websites, seeing if they are taking students. Something I've also heard is, so I guess twofold, is reaching out to them. I had a prof at Harvard actually tell me, she said, you need to kind of stay in their inbox and be almost a little bit of a pest, establishing those relationships with them. It really makes a big difference. I think part of the reason that I got into my program here at U of T was because I reached out to the prof and I said, I'm really interested in your work. Are you taking students? And I had almost a pre-interview before my formal interview. And I think that really helped them be familiar with me and think, oh, Emily might be a good fit for this, and how like we're super close. In terms of timelines, I was kind of starting to prepare my applications or, get things together in like August, early September. I believe I emailed all of my references in the beginning of September, to give them as much time as possible. If it's people that you're particularly close with, sometimes they'll have you write your rec letter, and then you send it to them and they kind of edit it or add their own personal touch and send it off. So the earlier, the better, to be sure. And I guess I will cut myself off there because I want to give others a chance to talk. But those are some of the things, like look at the research you're citing, look at the research that's being done, and start sooner rather than later.
Thank you. How about Sean? You applied for the PhD in theoretical biology. How did you present that kind of your experience at HES to have this committee to understand your research will be aligned with the theoretical biology, the program that you're doing now?
I think one thing related to that, and also adding to what have already been shared by others, is that there is structural difference between doing a PhD in the United States and in Europe. In Europe, usually the PhD program lasts 3 to 4 years, and also it will be a position that is research focused. Basically, you are there and start doing research right after getting admitted to the program, or the program officially start. And in the US, you are treated as a master student. They give you 1 to 2 years of courses, and then you start actual research. So I think it's just a huge difference. And also in Europe, usually you are hired by a professor. Basically, the professor make the decision whether they want to take you or not. And in the US, it is considered by the whole faculty or a group of professor rather than a single person. So in Europe, it is more about whether you can persuade the professor that have the fund to hire you as a PhD student. And what happened to me is that my professor thought that I am enthusiastic in studying behavior, and my experience doing a PhD at Harvard Extension School cover some courses that touch on evolutionary theory and social behavior, so that I were able to express my interest and also mention some of the classic literature that overlap theoretical biology and psychology of social behavior.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That is really insightful. Okay. For our final theme, we want to touch on the reality of doctorate training, like since like funding, workload, and what to expect once you're actually in that program. There are all kinds of like details students rarely hear about this outside this kind of conversation. So I want to ask, like the funding mode may vary across different kind of programs and degree types. What do you think HES students should know about the funding packages, assistantship, tuition models, or other financial considerations of your program?
I'm happy to.
Oh, please go ahead,
No,
please.
no, Mark, you go because I've been talking.
Yeah, so I can't speak to the PhD programs, obviously, but financially speaking, PsyD programs are notoriously expensive. It's it's kind of more of a medical school model, so it's a little bit shorter of a time frame, is my understanding, as others were kind of alluding to. It felt to me a little bit more defined, but the kind of flip side of that is like it's a tuition model, and it is extremely expensive. So it's definitely worth considering that, or it's not necessarily the one driving factor, but it's something to think about.
I guess being in a PhD, I can speak to the funding package. I'm glad that we have a PsyD person on board, but I can say for PhDs, if they are not offering you funding, you should not go there, like bar none. All PhDs should be paying you. Usually, it's not a very handsome amount. Again, I live in Toronto, and I would say I barely make a living wage, and I'm very fortunate that I live with some family members, so I don't pay rent, which is a huge, huge help. Um, but we are the sort of working logic is that we teach for this school and we are doing research for this school. So although we are students, we are also, that's sort of like our employment status is being researchers and TAs for this school. We do get a base package of I actually don't remember how much it is, but they did just increase it this year, which has been a huge relief. And then on top of that, we are also expected to TA. And then the more hours that we TA for a class, the more money we can make. I have a friend this semester, he's TAing like an insane amount of hours, but his income is much higher because he's doing all of those hours. So there's a little bit of flexibility in how much money you can make. It's a little bit tricky to balance sometimes, having this demand of taking a couple of courses, focusing on your research, and then also for me, TAing is mostly just invigilating and marking exams. But whenever those exams do come, I'll have anywhere from 60 to 80 exams that I have to mark, and so that can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes. But I think with proper planning, it's doable. And maybe on a more personal note, I just had wanted to be in a PhD program and be like a proper grad student for so long that even though it's really stressful, I'm just like so happy and grateful to be here. So I think about that a lot. If I get a little too stressed, I'm like, Emily, this is your dream. You wanted this. So even sometimes in the hard times, I'm so glad to be part of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. My final question before we open up the floor for Q&A for Mark. So you are in your 4th year of the 5-year PsyD program, which means you are getting very close to the job market, right? And also you mentioned you are preparing for your APA pre-doctoral internship next year. So could you talk a little bit how the internship prepares you for the PsyD professional in the future, and based on what you have learned so far, what do employers tend to look for, and how you preparing yourself to meet those kind of expectations?
Yeah, so this is a very pertinent question to where I'm at in the program right now. So I'm currently awaiting responses for I think the 19 applications I sent in for internship, which is about, they encourage you to do, I think, like between 16 and 20. So for those unfamiliar, like I was during my master's, was um, and kind of talking to about what Kimia had mentioned. When you're researching schools, you want to look into what's called the match rate, like I think you were mentioning. But you want a higher match rate. What the match rate is that school's tendency to match their doctoral students with APA accredited internships. And I'm probably, because I'm so in the middle of it, and I tend to probably put a little bit heavier weight on that process, but it does feel a little bit like kind of like the last student hurdle before it's the professional hurdle. And it's funny because I was listening to a podcast with it's like a popular neuropsych podcast, but they were these kind of like mid-career neuropsychologists. They were thinking back on like their internship as like the first time they ever did like training in psychology. And for me, it's like, well, I have all these practicum experiences. I spent all my time doing all that work, and this internship is this big, you know, big monster of a process to get into. So that's been heavy on my mind. So I'm currently just kind of in this limbo stage, waiting for invitations. It's programs all around the country. I know we're talking about HES, so some of us may or may not be in the Boston area. Boston area is notoriously, like, there's a lot of universities and there's a lot of hospitals, and there's a lot of competition. So one thing is you kind of got to be prepared to, if you match with a program that's elsewhere, that's binding and you're committed. So um, I've had to kind of come to terms with the potential of like maybe moving to a different state or a different part of the country. I guess just trying to think of like provide like for professional opportunities from there. So the internship, my understanding of it is that you're looking like you're kind of like specializing, but at the same time like trying to keep things general. So it's almost like doubling up your clinical workload in a way. And for a lot of some fields, neuropsychology being one of them, like you're aiming to try and get into a 2-year postdoctoral position to kind of like continue your training for specifically for clinical neuropsychology. And from there, there's a multitude of options that you can kind of choose.
Great,
Sorry
thank
for
you.
a lot of info.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. We wish you all the best for finding your next professional career. Thank you so much to all our panelists. These insights are very incredible, valuable. I think right now we have limited time, so I will hand this over to Maya to guide us through the Q&A session. Thank you all.
Thank you for passing this over to me. So we're going to be doing a brief question and answer session. I got a couple of questions in the chat, but feel free to submit more or raise your virtual hand. So the first question I received was, what are the options after the ALM, practically speaking? And also, after your doctoral program, what are your professional options there?
I can jump in if you want. I just wanted to point out when you say ALM, because I just remembered, just FYI, you can also apply with your bachelor's, which I thought I knew. Some schools actually, especially because it's Harvard Extension School, and some of you might have like great connections with like research and other things that you've done and great mentors that can write you references. You can also try with your bachelor's. You might get in because I know a couple of people that have. And also, even if it doesn't happen, it's a great learning experience. So when you apply after maybe getting your master's, that can work out even better for you. And I don't know, is it okay to share something else that I know we went over getting PhDs? I just want to tell everyone, please don't get discouraged right now, because I know a lot of funding was cut for research. So they're accepting way less students. It does not mean that you don't have an incredible background in something. They have really cut it down. But because of that, so I know Emil mentioned that don't pay for PhDs, but I know a few people that have started because, you know, they want to continue their education, but it's not available. The opportunities are not available. So I know one of our graduates went into the education field after getting her master's from HES in, I think it was psychology, and she's actually getting her doctorate in education from Penn State. And I have another friend who's getting her PhD from the Chicago School in Business Psychology. It's only 2 or 3 years, but those are paid PhD programs. But that's why they have a higher chance of getting accepted. So it's kind of up to you to look into programs. If it works for you that you have to pay for it, maybe that is the way for you to go too. So don't automatically, you know, put stuff that it's paid into a bin that you want to get rid of, basically. But yeah, because sometimes the PhD programs end up being 7 years, but some of them that are paid are only 2 or 3 years. So just kind of see what works for you, and also consider that it's gotten really, really, really competitive getting into programs in the US. But also something that my mentors told me that I want to make sure I shared, they said also consider applying outside of US. Canada and Europe are great ones. There are a few also in Asia that are great ones. So just look around and see what can work for you. Sorry, I hope I stayed on topic, but I wanted to make sure everybody knows this.
Thank you. Did any of you consider paths other than the doctoral path, or consider PhD and PsyD?
I don't want to talk again, but I absolutely did. So I was stuck between nurse practitioner and going to the education field, because I've been working in the education field for over 10 years in the nonprofit education field. And I'm also a nurse. So I was wondering if I should go nurse practitioner into mental health rather than doing this. But I'm really, really, really happy that I did this, because my number one thing was to work one-on-one with clients. So I think this was the best thing that could have happened for me. But yes, absolutely.
On the flip side, I can say pretty quickly, when I came fresh out of undergrad, after deciding I wasn't going to be a lawyer, I was like, I'm getting a PhD and like that's final. But because my first application round was unsuccessful, I had about a 4-year gap between those application cycles. And I was doing a lot of one-on-one work with children with autism. I was behavior therapist. And I was like, wow, I really, really enjoy this one-on-one interaction. I really like applying these like therapies and interventions. And I really like building a relationship with these kids. So much so to this day, I still miss my kiddos. Like one of them, her birthday was last week, and I couldn't like get in contact with the family for the HIPAA reasons, but I was like, oh, I missed my kids a lot. And so as I was applying a second time, I had this glimmer of, oh, well, what if I did a PsyD, or what if I did like a clinical master's or something that would like allow me to practice therapy at a higher level, perhaps. And I ultimately still decided to go for the PhD, but after my PhD, I'm actually now open to the thought of, oh, if I go and do some kind of clinical master's or like a social work or LMFT or something like that, to be able to continue to have those one-on-one experiences, because I learned that that was really meaningful for me. So it kind of, having that gap really, it mixed me up in a good way, but it showed me how much I really enjoy that one-on-one and how I really hope to kind of bridge research and practice together. So
Thank you. And I think we have about 1 more minute. So the next question that I saw in the chat was how many of you had publications or didn't have them, and did this affect your application process? And this person said, I'm nervous about that aspect as I have not had the opportunity to publish after switching careers and starting in clinical research last year. And I know, Emily, that you said in the chat that you did not have publications, which gives me hope for sure.
yeah, most of us did. Most of us did not. A lot of my peers were shocked when they'd seen that I'd had conference, even like posters. And not that Reddit is the end all be all of information, but this question gets asked a lot on Reddit, and most people on Reddit that like whenever that question gets asked, they're like, I had none, I had zero. I think it's very, very common to not have any publication.
Thank you.
Yeah, I still don't have any publications. I'm hoping to change that with my dissertation, fingers crossed. But yeah, that I wouldn't let that. Speaking, it probably applies more to PsyD programs, but as Emily mentioned, like it's not impossible like either way. But yeah, most of it's rare. It's like exciting when some like one of your peers says like, oh, I'm working on publishing something for my master's, because you don't see it so often, or at least that's been my experience where like friends of mine have been like, oh, I'm trying to get something published. Like that's fantastic. So I wouldn't get too hung up on it at this point.
Thank you.
I did not have any publication at that time in English. I have publication in in other language. What I see from people around me is a PhD student from my department, biology, from St. Andrews, mostly do not have any publication. People start publishing things after 1 or 2 years in the PhD program.
Thank you. I have one more question. So Kimia, you mentioned that you started applying kind of late. So could any of you speak to kind of the length of the application process and when to start looking, and if that differs between PsyD and PhD?
For me, it was kind of like dedicating a month for all the applications because I was late. I was honestly late. And that just to make sure I get my recommendation letters, I wrote so many different versions of my personal statement and the other, I forgot what it's called, the other letter that you need, but I made sure to run it by my most trusted mentors and some of my other friends who had been accepted into doctorate programs. And it was really helpful because some of them were like, no, I also spoke to some of the people at the admissions for some of the schools, and they were like, if you wrote it, if it's on your like paperwork and resume, do not repeat it again in your personal statement. We want to know why you qualify. I don't want you to repeat what you've done that I can already see on another piece of paperwork. So that was something that I learned too. So I wrote at least 20 different drafts per school, because you want to make sure that you are highlighting stuff that the school is looking for, not repeating the same thing over and over again. So that was something that that's why it took me so long and some sleepless nights and making sure I knew all the requirements, the dates, and then when you have your references, you have to keep checking to make sure they submitted it on time for you, like your recommenders. So that was nerve-wracking. And then sometimes you have to bug them like, please send it in, like the deadline has reached. But yeah, so just as long as you I think organize it, write it down, and put the important dates on your calendar, set reminders. That way, even if you're starting late, there's still a chance.
Just to briefly add to that, I feel like September through the end of November was just chaos for me when I was applying. And what I did that I think really helped me was I basically tried to have one application done a week, especially in November. I was like, I'm gonna submit one a week. And I think that just sort of helped me like get rid of the clutter of it all and thinking, okay, I'm really gonna focus my time and energy specifically on what this one school is looking for, cross all my T's, dot all my I's, and that one's done. I don't have to think about it. And that was really helpful for me rather than waiting till like all of the December 1st deadlines or all of the December 15th deadlines.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Different from what's happening in North America, in Europe, usually position are posted online by any time. As long as a faculty member get money and decide to have a new student, they post it online. So my advice for those who are interested in doing PhD in Europe is to keep an eye on the professor that you enjoy reading his work or her work. And you could also try contacting them to see if they have spare money to take you as a student.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay. So this person sent in, I'm looking for PhD pathways in adolescent well-being, usually a culturally grounded mind-body regulatory protocol grounded in developmental psych and neuropsychology. Are you aware of any hybrid PhD options that allow international field work? And how does the process usually start? Contacting supervisors or shortlisting programs first?
I can kind of, just because I literally had a meeting yesterday with the Chicago school, and I found out that they do have a global like international students basically for some of the fields that they have. I'm trying to find it right now. I'll put the link in the chat as soon as I find it. But I believe they have a few programs that are online fully, and they are doctorate degrees. Some of them also connect more to like a mix of education and psychology together. But I'll put the link, and it's really worth checking out. You can email them to get more information, or if you let me know, because I found the contact yesterday, so I can email them directly and ask for you. But I'll put the links of the different programs available so you can check it out. I hope that helps.
Thank you. And I'm just going to put our social media links in the chat one more time for anyone who joined late. Does anybody else have something to add for that last question?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maya. Thank you all. And a huge thank you to our panelists for sharing such thoughtful and honest and practical insight today. Your experience really helped our psych student here at HES. And we're grateful for the time and wisdom you shared with our community. To everyone who joined us today, we hope this session give you some clarity and encouragement as you think about your own academic or professional next steps. This is exactly what our Psychology Student Club aims to do. So we're trying to create the space where we learn from one another and stay connected. Thank you again for being here today. We're really looking forward to seeing you at our future events. Thank you all.